The Women's Club has an impressive 128-year history of service to the Chautauqua experience, and today we're focusing on providing a venue where people can gather to engage in dialogue and form friendships, scholarship opportunities for students in the fine arts and performing arts schools, and relevant programs. Every week we offer 4 programs, 3 at the clubhouse down by the lake, and 1 here on Saturday. We're always interested in meeting more men and women who share our commitment to learn about contemporary issues, to work on helping the students with scholarship funding, and to have fun. So please look at our website to learn more about the Chautauqua Women's Club. It's really easy. It's www.chautauquawomensclub.org, no spaces. I want to highlight 3 things that are coming up this week. Sheila Schroeder from Mosaic Financial Partners is coming down on Tuesday morning at 9:15 to talk about personal financial planning policies. And on Wednesday at 3:30 at the clubhouse, we will have a contemporary issues dialogue with Ron Charles, who's the fiction editor at the Washington Post. And then on Thursday morning, Judith Clare, who's a retired Chautauqua County Family Court judge and a Chautauqua Institution trustee, will come to speak with us at the house at 9:15. Also, please remember to sign up for 1 or more of our now famous Dine Around events. There's special evenings at people's homes where we raise money to support the programs, the scholarship fund, and the facility. And we still have openings in 5 of the events that are coming up, but the tickets do sell fast. So we have a flyer listed over at the membership table that tells you how to get them, what's coming up, etc. It's really another side of the Chautauqua experience. And on August 10th, longtime Chautauquan Herb Kaiser has prepared an excellent afternoon based on the life of the Beatles at Lene Hall. This is going to be a wonderful event. Please pick up the flyer for the Beatles event also at the membership table over there. I really hope you'll stop over there and talk to some of our members who are sitting there. The Chautauqua Women's Club does a lot, has a lot, and it's a really cheap price. It's only $25 for membership, so I hope you would consider coming. Okay, the format for today. Our speaker, Dr. Philip Kotler, will talk for about 40 minutes. After his talk, you're invited to come to the 2 microphones and for questions and answers. And I would like to remind you that we're looking for thought-provoking questions, not for speechifying. This talk is being recorded. It will be available Sunday, tomorrow, around 11, and there will be a book signing over here at that table after Dr. Kotler speaks. Now I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today. Dr. Philip Kotler is the S.C. Johnson & Son Distinguished Professor of International Marketing at the Kellogg School of Management at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. He has the master's degree he earned at the University of Chicago, studying under Nobel laureate Milton Friedman. And he has a PhD degree he earned at MIT, studying under Nobel laureates Paul Samuelson and Robert Solow. And the postdoctoral work he did in mathematics under Howard Raifa at Harvard University, and his postdoctoral other work he did in behavioral science under David Reisman at the University of Chicago. In addition to all this, Philip Kotler has received 20 honorary degrees. He is widely recognized as the father of modern marketing and the world's foremost expert on strategic marketing. He originated the field of social marketing, which is now generally called behavioral economics. Philip Kotler is the author of 58 books, a marketing consultant who works with individuals, organizations, multinational corporations, and advises countries on how to develop and position the skills and resources of their companies so they can compete globally. And he and his wife, Nancy, are Chautauquans. I will stop talking about him now and let him talk to you about the compatibility, or lack thereof, of democracy and capitalism. Please welcome Philip Kotler. Philip Kotler.
Elizabeth, thank you very much for the introduction and for inviting me to speak. I'm overeducated. I think that's pretty clear. But I guess I have a wide range of interests in many, many things. I want to introduce, before I start, my lawyer. I make sure that my lawyer always comes with me in case I say something wrong, and she'll stop me in time. My lawyer, will you stand up? That's my wife. And she's been my lawyer for 60 years. Okay. I want to correct a statement made in the newspaper. The interviewer did a very good job, but there was one thing, when I said 15%, she said 50% in the text about the actual poverty level in this country. And we have a definition of poverty, and it's about 15%. And it's stayed at that level, except for really deep recessions and so on, when it gets worse. But capitalism hasn't removed poverty. I think it should find a way to do that, but it hasn't done that. But there's still another 40% of the people in this country who are, if you add to the 15% who are in poverty, another 40% are very desperate. They're living for the paycheck. The paycheck is not enough because they have debt. They couldn't live without debt. Very few people get a living wage, especially the working class. They have to borrow. So after getting their paycheck, they will either pay off some of their debt or borrow more to keep them going. So let's see why that is and what we can say about that. I wanted to be very careful of how I say things, but let's see if I can get this to work. Incidentally, I am an economist, not a marketing person initially, but I went into marketing because I thought there would be a branch called market economics, and how does the market work? How does it serve us? How does it produce all those goods and services? How do we share the results of the market working? And you may know that there's been a recent change in classical economics. We economists have been trained in classical economics, which has this basic assumption: all of you are rational people. You are maximizers. Not only you, if you're a producer, you're going to maximize profits. If you're a consumer, you're going to maximize your satisfaction. That concept is being dropped increasingly if you really want to understand markets and the distribution of income. We now say that we have a new field called behavioral economics. And the purpose of behavioral economics is to study how people actually behave and make their decisions. We want to know how producers make their decisions and consumers make their decisions. And we know that there are a lot of shortcuts. We call these heuristics or algorithms. Namely, we can't maximize. You know, it would take you a lifetime to make a perfect decision because you would need information about everything that has happened and everything that might happen, and who has the time? We can't be fully rational. And when I heard about the growing development of the field called behavioral economics, I said, that's a joke. That's not the right name. The right name is marketing. Because for 100 years, marketers have been studying exactly what in this new breed says they want to study, namely how decisions are actually made in the marketplace. So I wrote the book Confronting Capitalism in 2016 because I became aware of 14 or so shortcomings. It wasn't an interest in replacing capitalism, it was an interest in fixing it, making it work for more people. And then I noticed that there seems to be a tendency for capitalism to corrupt democracy. That is to say, to eat democracy up. We had 17 candidates from the Republican Party running for office, and that's fine, but each one needed a billionaire in order to run. So this means that our political candidates need so much money to get elected that they do owe their first allegiance to who? The citizens, the donors. You don't cross your donors. The second group that they will consider is the party. Political parties were not thought much of in the Constitution. In fact, I don't know if the Constitution talks about political parties. Jefferson and others said they're worried about these parties that substitute for your thinking. And today, the whole gridlock is basically about the parties running the candidates and telling them how to think. So I would say the second thing is what the party wants. First thing is the donors. Second, party. Third is lobbyists. There's a real advantage for a candidate or an elected official responding to a lot of the lobbyists. Not that they're going to be bribed. They'll be bribed subtly. You know, you get invited to more parties. Certain expenses may suddenly be taken care of, whatever. So the third group that they pay attention to are the lobbyists. And if there's any energy left, it goes to your citizens. So it's a corruption. And it's a corruption based on the great amount of money that is circulating from capitalism to make this democracy really suffer from itself 14 shortcomings, including gerrymandering, where 90% of the candidates get reelected each time. If you cut up the districts in the right way, that will happen. And as a matter of fact, they're more extreme candidates as a result of the gerrymandering. Because they have a very reliable cut of the territory that consists only of the people who care about them greatly. And there's other faults in democracy that we have to look at. So let me move on. And I want to quote a person who we all know, Winston Churchill, as a very wise and sagacious observer. Let me share two quotes. The first one has to do with a comparison that Winston Churchill drew of what he called capitalism versus socialism. By the way, for socialism, that has a lot of meanings. In a modest way, it just means that the state is doing a little more, certainly to provide safety for its people, a safety net and some other things, but everyone else is free to start businesses. It's what we call soft social democracy, soft social economics. Then there is real socialism where the state owns everything. That's communism, really. So if I say that, this is a remark that Winston Churchill made about capitalism versus socialism, and you got to guess at what sense he meant by socialism. The remark was this: the inherent vice of capitalism is the unequal sharing of blessings. In other words, there are rich and poor people. He said the inherent virtue of socialism, he was gracious enough to say it may have some virtue, is the equal sharing of misery. So it's an opinion of a lot of people that socialism means we all work together, but no one's making much money. There's lazy people as well, and we're all going to be miserable. It just equalizes misery. Then Churchill made another interesting observation that I want to share with you. By the way, if he's right, we really have a Hobson's choice. What system do we want to live under? Is there a middle way? Is there a middle way? I'm going to make the case there's a middle way. Churchill made another remark. Most of you know this one. Democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the other forms that have been tried. He made two insights after stating that. He said, democracy is still superior in two ways to any other system, even though he put it down. First, it is the only system with moral integrity that you could really believe in because it puts the power in the people and not in the rulers. Secondly, he said, it is the only system that has the capacity for self-correction. And that's very important, that a system with errors in it can be corrected. Now, I'm going to use his two observations about democracy for capitalism, because he was talking only about democracy at the time. Let's say that capitalism is the worst form of economy, except for all the other types of running an economy. And let's ask these two questions. Does capitalism have moral integrity and legitimacy? Does it really make everyone better off? I know, you're shaking your head, and that's what I'm going to say too. It does not benefit everyone under the system. And the second is, does capitalism have a capacity for self-correction? Can it stop making the rich richer and start showering a better life on more Americans? So these are legitimate and disturbing questions about our current state of capitalism. There are many good things about capitalism that we won't knock at all. I'm going to mention them very, very fast because you know most of them. It allows anyone with means or the means to even borrow money to start a business. We don't stop people from starting a business. We want private enterprise. It has produced an impressive economic growth rate in the past. It has helped foster much innovation that we appreciate and that has brought about a better life. And what else can we say about it? And that it allows business people to invest where they want to invest and consumers to buy what they want to buy. It's a very excellent system. But let's look at the bads that have been creeping up. It's marked by a growing concentration of income and wealth in the hands of a very small number of people who have extra influence on our politics as well as on their own economic lives. It produces, according to Bill Moyer, who was our guest last week, a winner-take-all system, a winner-take-all economic system. And it becomes difficult for the public to acknowledge the cost of human misery and everyday hardship that millions of people face trying to struggle to survive. So does it have moral legitimacy in its present American form of capitalism? Secondly, it hasn't eliminated poverty. We still are stuck with 15%, roughly, and as Bill Moyers mentioned last week, he said our most vital safety nets are frayed and fraying right now. Well, we know the health system problem that we're so concerned with. Capitalism is moving into a stage where more jobs will be done by machines. So we will need one of two systems when there aren't any more jobs for enough people. We either are going to go to what is called the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is a system of looking at what a worker, a person would normally be paid and looking at what a living wage is and making up the difference. So it's a credit, a tax credit. You get, it's money you get that fills the difference between what you need to live on and what you're actually getting. Or we're going to go to a more radical system called the universal basic income. Being tried, by the way, in Finland, voted against in Switzerland, which has tried it. It has to do with giving an amount of money to everyone that allows them to live better. I guess that includes the rich, too. There's different forms. One form I got interested in is, why don't we give a savings account to every baby born? $5,000, $10,000, and not to be used except for education later on. So at least make a pretense of having equal opportunity for people. Then another criticism is that capitalism encourages a high level of individualism, and it neglects building community and cooperation for the common good. It neglects the public sector, public goods, and the environment and the climate. Doesn't have to, but it tends to. Capitalism is subject to ups and downs. Every 5 to 10 years, there will be another recession, partly because much of economic growth is really, in this country, riding on a bubble. Oh, everyone's buying a home. Homes are getting higher in value. I got to buy a home. And we overdo it. And then if there's any slight dip, we don't have the money to keep our home going. And we've got to do a better job of being alert to bubbles and to taming them down in advance. Another criticism is that many businesses are short-term in their investments. They must produce growth and profits every quarter. It's hard to have the courage to, as a CEO, to say, we didn't do well this period, but there's a reason I wanted to invest more in innovation, because otherwise we'll have Kodak's fate. Kodak, which had 140,000 people working for Kodak, didn't get into the digital. They invented the digital phone. They invented it, but they were making too much money. They became what we call rentiers. A rentier is living by rent. They have something, they have property, and it's yielding so much that you don't want to invest maybe to get something else that might be forthcoming and be needed. So they didn't do the job, and now we don't have Kodak, so to speak. So business tends to be very short-term in its investment thinking. And I would like to see a system where we actually have the CEO account for his long-term goals and how, in fact, we say often, when the CEO retires, he shouldn't get all the money that he expected. He should have been told in advance that for the next 5 years after retirement, he'll get the payout. The incentive being that he will want to leave it in good condition. Because without that idea, what's the incentive of a CEO who might be retiring in 3 years? Cut the R&D, pay as little as you can to workers and suppliers and so on, because I'll be out and I get a golden parachute anyways. So we've got to correct some of the things missing in our economic system. One of the missing things is we measure the performance by the GDP, the gross domestic product. All that the gross domestic product does is it measures how much is the total value of all the goods and services produced. By the way, women in their homes, if they're housewives, are producing services, but we don't measure that. There's a lot, and what do we measure? If we produce more guns, GDP goes up. You understand that it mixes up good and bad things that are being measured. What it doesn't measure is any index of well-being or any index of happiness. We had to find a small country in Asia whose king developed an index of happiness, one being used now by some countries in Europe. An index of happiness or an index of well-being. Are we doing better with happiness and well-being in our system? So those are the kinds of questions that those are some of the issues. Now, we have living here too, another couple, maybe you know Peter Georgescu. And Peter was the head of Y&R, Young and Rubicon, and did many wonderful things. And he wrote a book recently called Capitalists Arise. You remember the phrase from Karl Marx, you know, people arise or take over. What was the expression? Workers of the world unite or something like that. So, but this is called Capitalists Arise. So here are some of the things he said, and it's a mix of things he said and I've been thinking of too. When productivity rises, and we want productivity to rise because we'll all benefit from productivity rising, profits will rise, but end up as higher capital gains and dividends to the shareholders, higher bonuses to management, more rebuying of corporate stock, and not influence the wage rates. So workers do not participate and share in the productivity gains. In fact, how many years has it been since the average worker had income increase? It all started in the 1980s when rates became flat in earnings, and that's 37 years ago. For 37 years ago, the average worker has not improved his lifestyle, unless he borrowed a lot of money to do that. And there's a few other things, and then I want to actually get some of your thoughts. By the way, many business leaders agree, who you talk to, that something is wrong with the system and that it ought to be fixed, especially income inequality. They agree, but they say, I am a CEO. I can't, unless big groups are formed of people who will back this, I can't do it myself. I've got to produce higher profits, or the board will replace me with another CEO. And they judge it not by my long-term ideas on how to build the company, but by building it up each quarter. By the way, you know, a lot of companies have now said we're not going to report estimates by quarter. That's too short-term. So, and there are some enlightened business people, thank God, there's some really enlightened ones. And I'm thinking of companies like Unilever, Starbucks, Johnson & Johnson. Let me mention Johnson & Johnson. Here's their set of values. Number one, first group you must serve, not the shareholders. No. First group, who? Customers. I mean, you die if you don't really deliver good things to customers. Second group is who? Employees. They've got to be happy people about their work. They've got to feel it's a fair, good job and a fair pay for the job. The third is the communities in which we do our business. We have to help them grow too. And the fourth, if there's any money left, the shareholders will get it. It just reverses the whole thing. The shareholders, somehow we who teach business in business schools, and I teach at the Kellogg School of Management, we got it all wrong. We told our students that their job is to maximize profits for the investors. And you know, the investors don't really own the company. They own shares in the company. But the company actually owns itself. If you want to think a little bit about that, there's other people who have, there's assets, there's receivables, there's debts, there's a lot of things. But we somehow bought Milton Friedman, my own professor's theory in his book, Freedom to Choose, that if we don't allow free market capitalism to operate, we're going to go down a slippery slope of socialism and lose our industry, our energy. But there are wonderful things happening in this regard, by the way, of trying to get some business people to care about the state of things and who have the nerve to do something about it. And one expression that I just love is, have you heard of the giving pledge? Anyone hear of the giving pledge? Thank you. A few of you have. Bill Gates gets together with his Warren Buffett. It's sort of a son-father relationship. They also play bridge together, and they hire toughest bridge players to play against. But they started the giving pledge. They do 1 billionaire at a time. They take him or her out to lunch or dinner. I think they pay for it. Maybe they make him pay for it. And they say, could you see yourself giving away half of your wealth in the next 10 years to a good cause? Today, 192 billionaires have done the pledge. And you can find out about each of them and where they're giving their money by just looking up the giving pledge. And there's a box for Ted Turner. There's a box for Zuckerberg. Each of those people are saying in their box, you just click on it, where they're gonna put their money. They'd rather give it away to a cause they believe in than to give it to the government. The argument usually is, I don't want the government to build more battleships or air carriers, which they themselves don't want. That's why I don't want higher taxes, by the way. See, when a businessman says, I think we should have lower taxes, it's really partly for his own benefit, there's no question. But he also says a lot of the money is wasted on $4,000 toilet seats that the government buys. You know that we don't have a Senator Kefauver any longer. Do you remember Senator Kefauver? Wasn't he the one who was watching the prices of goods that the government was buying? Who else? Yes, there was an award, the Golden Fleet Award. Was it Prox? Well, wasn't Kefauver? It was Prox. But we don't have anyone today watching and reporting. So let's start it. Let's start it again. Okay, so I know we're going to, a few more things, and then some people ask me if I could give them not only good questions to ask me, but good answers. But I hope you're doing that. Actually, there is a cynical concern that I sometimes have about the business people not doing much about this inequality problem. And the cynical side of me says they know that the system is getting bad and may even fail. So they want to take what they can get out of it before it fails. There must be some people like that who won't take any action, but they will put their money overseas. They'll move the company to another country. That's called inversion. They will press the Republican Party to get lower taxes for the wealthy, even if it means a poorer health system for the many. So there are cynical business people who are just going to get what they can get out of the system while it lasts. So what I want to do is say that we have to make a choice. Here's the choice. Do we want a free market capitalism? It used to be called a cowboy capitalism because the ideal of one party is no regulations and minimum government. You could call it a cowboy economy but whatever, it's really financial capitalism. The truth is, the banks and the people who have the capital are running the system. As a matter of fact, think about this one. The politicians, Congress is not running the country. I just told you how they're elected and what they care about. The country's run by the very large corporations and by the wealthy. And through their choice of who will be our representatives and to get the representatives to do what they want them to do. So we have a choice. We either stay with free market capitalism, or we go with what we might call social democracy or social capitalism that has a heart. And my best list of things that should be done as palliatives, some cures for the system, are to look at what Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren have said. I don't know how you can disagree with this. Our system needs to pay a higher minimum wage, whether it's $10 instead of $7 or $15. Our system needs a single-payer health system. Otherwise, you're going to leave people in the lurch who have all kinds of health problems, and it will just destroy and bankrupt many of them. Our system needs to lower the cost of college being free in many European countries. We've got to control the climate, too. We have to put a tax on carbon. We have to fix the criminal justice system. We've got to fix the immigration system. We've got to break up banks that are too big to fail, and we've got to close a lot of loopholes. So the debate in the past election between Bernie Sanders and others, left versus right, was about palliatives. Are there things that will ease and make the system work a little better for more people? And my own preference is for a higher tax on income, on high income and high wealth. My wife disagrees with me, but that's another thing. I think if you have money, use it wisely, but if you run a company, be good to your employees, after all. And there's great evidence that those companies that are gracious to their employees and they invest in innovation and creativity perform better for everyone. And for the profit level and the investors as well. So now I'm going to end with how do you make a choice between two systems, free market capitalism or more social democracy? If you ask Yogi Berra, and all of you may know Yogi Berra, the baseball player, he says it's very simple. When you come to a fork in the road, take it, which is no advice. I don't know what that, he's not helping us. But I thought the better philosopher in this case was Woody Allen. And you may have heard this one, because he answered the question with prophetic vision. More than any time in history, mankind faces a crossroads. One path leads to despair and utter hopelessness. The other, to total extinction. Let us pray that we have the wisdom to choose correctly. So that's it, folks. I'm going to have to face your tough questions. So if you line up on both sides, and I'll keep going back and forth. You were first.
You alluded to Milton Friedman. I'd love to hear your opinion on the flat tax rate.
Oh, on a flat tax. Mm-hmm. In other words, you read Forbes magazine, maybe, because he always has been pushing the flat tax. I don't think that's fair. See, so let's compare it to a progressive tax. A flat tax could be a simpler thing. Simple. There's no But,
You get rid of all deductions.
yeah, by the way, both systems, whether you are for a progressive system or a flat tax, you can get rid of a lot of deductions. There is a question about the rich actually have a lot of benefits. They always complain about the poor getting all of the, what do you call them, the extra help from the government. But we can deduct our mortgage cost, we can deduct our charity giving, and so on. We're also beneficiaries. But the thing is that should those who are wealthier pay a growing rate? In an article I published in HuffPost, I said, the rate has been constantly brought down. You know, under Eisenhower, some people were paying 90%. All the way down. They're down at 39.6%. And the fact is that my article said the rate should be progressive. In other words, you pay a higher percentage. The person who gets $10 million a year doesn't pay 39.6%. He pays 50% or something like that. We're waiting for tax policy. You'll see if the flat tax actually comes up, because that's the big Trump push for a reversion of the tax system. But I don't believe, I would not vote for the flat tax. But I would vote for simplifying the system. Yes.
Professor, in 1914, Louis Brandeis wrote a series of articles called Other People's Money. And he said, you can have wealth concentrated in a few hands, or you can have democracy. You can't have both. It sounds like he's right. So my question is, in 1914, he figured this out. This is 2017.
Right.
How come all you smart guys haven't been able to figure this out?
Because those with money are smarter than us.
Well,
They can influence us more, you know, they can influence more people by doing what the Koch brothers and others are doing, which I would say that Brandeis was right, that there's that's why the title of my talk might have been, is democracy and capitalism compatible? Because under capitalism, you've got quite a big difference with the rich and the poor, and then democracy says one vote, one person. We don't have now democracy, a la Koch brothers and everyone else spending loads of money, and we don't have, and we have a form of capitalism which is not working for most people. So Brandeis I can't answer why it hasn't changed. We have to all think about it. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've seen estimates of a spiral of medical costs is on an unsustainable upward swing.
Did you call it mental?
Medical services are on a cost spiral that's unsustainable.
Yeah, wait.
In the future.
Medical service.
Medical services.
Fine, I hear you. Yes.
Yeah, but it's difficult.
We're now at 17% of our GDP.
Yeah, and it's going up.
Well, it was 14% when we started to panic. You're right, it's going up. Now it's 17. I think we can contain it below 20%, but that would be a disaster anyway.
Well, I was going to ask you, is there a model that you can see that sustains costs but still gives medical services to everyone, which I think everyone deserves?
Yes. Thank you very much. I think if we were raising hands and we wanted to show our opinion, we'd all agree with you that that's a right, not just another good. Thank you. Yes, sir. Introduce yourself, by the way. You might introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm Bob Hopper. Hello.
Hi, Bob.
Our founding fathers and mothers and grandmothers never said they were creating democracy. They were creating a representative government with a bunch of gold.
Absolutely.
But be
true.
that as it may,
Yeah.
I'm now worried that my grandchildren, because of the wonders of automation and productivity, no matter how good an education they get, there aren't going to be jobs for them for which they'll be paid. And since we have an economy that requires people to be paid, why don't we just pay people? Why don't we abandon Calvinism and that our moral worth comes from having jobs and just pay people to get out of our way so that those who have talent can work? Can we do that?
You represent a point of view which is fresh and interesting, and I almost partake in that kind of thinking too. here's, the argument is made that people want to work and they get dignity from work. And we know how people fall apart after they retire. Someone mentioned it yesterday.
I didn't.
No, I know. Listen, I wrote a whole article recently, which I haven't published, on 100 different things you can do when you retire to really renew and reinvent yourself. No question about that. But some people who got so much into one thing, they left nothing else to be developed in their character. So let's address the group you might be referring to. There's a group of people who are not, are young people too, millennials, who have decided not to be working. And you're saying that's fine. Why shouldn't they develop the way they want to develop? Now, of course, if they want to spend their day drinking, that's one thing. Or if they want to write poetry and do other things, that's a different thing. We'd have to get into that. I'm pretty firm believer that we're going to have a surplus of workers and no jobs. I agree with you. And we have to start thinking about it now and how to handle the people. We can't let them die on the streets. We've got to, and your argument is just people are going to get a living wage whether or not they work.
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Thank you.
A number of years.
Who are we? What's your name?
I'm Bob Hesselberth from Rochester.
Nice to meet you.
We.
That's the town that just lost Kodak.
That's right.
Okay. Which was a whole city within the city.
They had 60,000 employees in Rochester at the peak, and you named their total employment.
Yeah.
In the 50s, when television was early, the poor did not have televisions, and the people above the poverty level generally got them.
Yeah.
Today, everybody has televisions, and there are still people considered to be in poverty. Is that because we've changed the target? And if so, how can we ever eliminate poverty?
Well, it's interesting that, by the way, the facts are that the poor people, when television came out, they did their best to get an early TV set because it was the cheapest form of entertainment they could find. They were also the first ones to buy little rowboats and other things, something that wasn't expensive, but they could share their anguish in a different way, compensate for it. But in any case, the definition of what is a poverty level keeps changing. And it's very different for different countries. I mean, if it was a matter of food and starvation, we would know what real poverty is. We would define that you don't have enough money to even eat. So I expect poverty definitions to change. But are you saying maybe that nowadays, with all these devices and accessible things that people could buy or borrow, and more of us are borrowing things. We're sharing our assets. We're sharing our houses, and you know, we're sharing our cars. You're saying, are people really going to have to be poor anymore when they're getting so many things that make the life quite an interesting life that they could have? It's a very fundamental, it's a good question.
It has to do with the definition of poverty, I think.
Yeah.
And my thought was that if it's changing, how can we have us?
And is there going to be a time when we'll get a definition such that no one will be defined as poor? Because they have all the things that make up a good life in some way. Yes, and you are?
Hi, I'm Pam Weiss from Pittsburgh.
Nice city.
Yes,
I spent time there.
Yes. So I was thinking about the giving pledge that you mentioned, and there were 162 billionaires who are willing to give half their money to a place they choose. And I'm thinking within the same paragraph, you were saying something about, within your paragraph, you were talking about whether we're going to get the minimum wage up to $10 or $12 an hour, which to me is a sin. I mean, currently it's an extra sin, but to get it up to that seems sinful. So I'm thinking about this economy where people can become billionaires and other people are barely eking out. They have to get food.
We have a name for it. We call it social injustice.
But I'm wondering where, in your thinking, can this ability to become a billionaire or multi-billionaire, where can that be stopped in this society?
Well, they talk about what to do for redistribution, if you want to use a word that a lot of people don't like, is you use you shouldn't tell a company that they're paying the CEO too much and making him into a multi-millionaire, because that gets political. But even there, we've done the following. There's a new thing called every company has to report, starting in 2018, what the boss gets as a ratio to the average worker in the firm. So what's the ratio on the average? The boss gets 300 to 400 times, in a big company, gets 300 to 400 times what the average worker gets per year. It used to be 20. In Japan, it's about 100 times. What is it in Japan? Are you from there? But how many times is the CEO's pay compared to the average worker in Japan? Huh. I thought it's not as bad as ours. And by the way, in Scandinavia, in the Scandinavian countries, their CEOs, they run big companies. I mean, you know, they used to be running Volvo. They're running a lot of the biggest companies. They don't get 300 or 400 times what the average worker gets. They don't think they deserve that. But so on the redistribution, if you want to get into sort of curbing, actually putting limits to what anyone could be paid, we got to talk about the athletes too. The athletes are billionaires. I mean, there's one athlete who just got a contract for the next 17 years, whatever happens to him. He's getting a ton of money each year. And what do we do? Well, the best system would be taxation, a higher tax rate on higher incomes. And then I would go to the estate taxes. Today, if a family is going to pay an estate tax, the husband and wife can be excused for $10 million. They're exempted. In other words, they should have a right to pass on or save $10 million. And then the rest is what, about 60%? Some of you are lawyers. You may know the estate tax business. Yeah. Now, the Republicans, or some of them, want to eliminate an estate tax, which will make the concentration of wealth even worse, you know, over time. So let's think in terms of Trump's family. What do you think if something happens to Trump? And no one wishes that, I'm sure. What happens to Ivanka and her boyfriend, her married husband? What happens? Should they not pay any estate tax? By the way, there may not be that much money in Trump's hands. We're going to find out. There's a wonderful person who he wants to fire now who may have the answer. But in any case, my feeling is that I would like to see a tax of about 70 or 80% on the remaining money of an estate if we want to bring down the concentration of wealth. Yes, sir. You are?
My name is Jeff Merrick, and my question concerns gerrymandering of federal, districts. What recommendations or suggestions do you have to try to minimize or maybe eliminate party beneficial gerrymandering? I'm thinking for instance, in California, we've now got establishing congressional districts was turned over to a citizens committee. Do you have, given especially that in many states the people who would have to give, people that are in power would have to give up power, how can they be motivated to want to do that?
Yeah, here's the thing. Each state is working on this. By the way, both parties are guilty of gerrymandering. And California may be more of a Democratic state?
By far.
By far. So they're guilty too. But what happens is when the other party points that out, that the legislature, it's usually the legislature of that state is in the hands of either Republicans or the Democrats. And they will do what they can to shape the districts.
Right.
then someone will bring a suit against that and say it should be turned over to a public commission of disinterested citizens, a mix of citizens, and they should redraw it. And the Supreme Court has endorsed that. We're having this next week as Supreme Court. Bring up that question to the experts there too about gerrymandering. But I think I'm always in favor of an independent commission being set up to review the mapping and to change it to being a fair mapping. Sometimes I put it this way: no district that is a voting district should have a shape like a snake. I mean, so I would say that every district has to have almost a circle to it. You force them to include both sides. Make it it should be a rectangle kind of thing, and that's what they try to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Here's what I want to say this. I want to hear all your questions, and won't get to them. Could each of you, I'm going to take notes, each of you tell us what the question is, so we can all think about these.
I just want to say I'm Anita's husband, and I'm a life member of the Chautauqua Women's Club.
Oh.
Are we in a bubble? You said every 5 to 10 years we go through a recession, and it's usually bubble-based. Are we in a bubble?
Oh, okay. I'm going to get back to that. What's your question?
The role, if any, of ideology in behavioral economics. President Reagan said that government is the problem.
Well, wait. You first said, are we at the role? Oh, the role of ideology, yes. Yeah. Well, look, that's the whole point, that we have two ideologies that are running the country. And one is running the country, but that's why I left it with that question of whether you want the system to remain the way it is, minimal government, minimal regulation, and free enterprise to the fullest, or you want some kind of measure of how well that system is serving most of the people. And that would require a little more regulation and a better safety net. Yes. What is your question?
My name is Lex Kreidler. I'm from Santa Barbara, California. It seems like a lot of the problems that have to deal with democracy and capitalism working together stem from how the corporations set their legal priorities and what types of legal designations we give those corporations. And as an alternative way to set up corporations, one example is the benefit corporation or the B corporation, which has led companies to set up their priorities to more align with the environment that they're in and the community that they're in, leading to programs such as 1% for the planet. So my question is, could it simply be just a matter of how these corporations are legally defined and set up so that their priorities change, and from there will trickle down solutions to a lot of these other problems?
You're raising a wonderful question about other forms of running businesses and incorporating them. The B Corporation, the nonprofit organization, the cooperative that is cooperatively owned, the mutual type company. There have been a lot of philosophers and economists who have written about these other forms of corporate enterprise, basically, that would be serving a very good purpose. But we haven't, you got to go to Europe, and you'll see in Scandinavia a lot of cooperative work being done in their enterprises. So it's a very good question. Again, I see a shadow over here. Called Elizabeth.
It's 4 o'clock. You can take one or two more questions or answer the ones you've already gotten.
Well, I wanted everyone to at least ask their question. If you don't mind just asking your questions, yeah. Okay. Just ask the question. Introduce yourself and just ask the question.
Al Fisher from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I understand from reading economists like Paul Krugman that over the last 14 presidencies covering 84 years, that the 7 presidencies under which the economy has performed best have all been Democrats, and the 7 that have performed worst have all been Republicans, even acknowledging the inadequacy of individual economic indicators like growth in GDP. How can you explain that 84-year pattern?
Oh, that's a great question, but I know about the fact that the facts are there. The Democrats had better results than the Republicans, yes. Thank you. But we'll think about why.
Yeah, Dave Lima from Cleveland, Ohio. As you're probably aware, there are a number of groups that are moving to have a 28th constitutional amendment that would declare the corporations are not people with constitutional rights, and money is not the equivalent of speech. So my question is, what impact do you think a 28th constitutional amendment would have on our democracy and our economy?
It would be wonderful to have that, but we don't even need it that way. We need a Supreme Court that will have a case where they can get rid of Citizens United.
Except that we don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, that's right. So we have 2 charges there. Okay, and your question?
I'm Max Lieber from Buffalo, New York. And my question was, if you feel it's the role of billionaires to give away their money and help bring up the poor, do you find it also to be the role of wealthier countries in the world to help the poorer countries of the world and try and pull them out of poverty, just as it falls on billionaires to pull up the poor?
That's an interesting thought, that should we help our own poor with the wealth of the wealthy, or should we get them to help the rest of the world? By the way, the economics takes care of that, because our companies look for the cheapest labor, so they go in. They are raising China's wages now. China is too expensive for some goods. Vietnam, the reason China is putting money into Africa is Africa will be the next location for manufacturing. So in a sense, we don't have to do it. We're doing it indirectly without saying, oh, give a lot of foreign aid. The problem with foreign aid is there's been studies saying that maybe 15% of the money given to other countries get to the poor, only 15%. So we got to worry about that. Let's find out what your concerns are.
Okay, my name is Holly Kerr, and I'm from Highland Park, Illinois,
Oh,
just
good.
north of where you are. My question, it's sort of a 2-part. What percentage of professors, particularly at prestigious business schools like where you are at Kellogg, have the same philosophy you have? And is there any change in terms of the way in which business executives are being trained?
Yeah, there's a cry for a better type of training. We have more and more ethics courses required in business schools. But here's the difference. People in the marketing department are more my persuasion. People in the finance department, they want the rich to get richer, or at least they're into the thinking. My worry as a marketer is that business is hurting itself by not paying enough money to employees, because if we don't have money to buy the products we really want and need, then there won't be jobs created. So marketing's job is to create better incomes for people, to believe that we need higher incomes for people so that there'd be an incentive to create enough jobs. And you have the distinction of the last question.
Yeah, Bill Bates, Pittsburgh, and also a life member of the Women's Club. The speech we had on Friday in the AMP about cybersecurity by this defense expert mentioned a couple 100,000 jobs that they can't fill in her industry because of lack of skills.
Yeah.
So address, if you would please, the education in our country, especially among people of lower means, of how to get them out of poverty by improving the education.
Well, first of all, I would welcome more people from India and Asia who have the skills that we badly need to be allowed to come into the country with a visa. We've been shortchanging them until we can make up for our own people having the skills. But the other thing is, there's a big movement now called to teach science and math. What's it called? STEM. STEM, yeah, STEM. Science, technology, and mathematics. So I think that's a slower and longer term process, but many schools now are working to we're getting a real model. By the way, we should also have much more teaching of trade, the trade schools, because some people are not going to take the STEM. So we have to, and we have a shortage of electricians or plumbers. We got to have enough. Germany does it right. Germany basically has a whole group that don't go to college because they don't really want to, they don't need it. They go into trade schools and they make a very good living, and so on. Thank you so much for sharing this with us.